Polizzi Generosa, Palermo, Firenze, Lugano, Napoli, Berlino, Torino, Roma, Alassio, Genova, Mestre, Sorrento, Parigi, Capri, Grado, Berna, Milano, Como, Cascata del Toce, San Vigilio di Marebbe, Costantinopoli, Atene, Sils Maria, Berkeley, New York, Northampton, Chicago.
I didn't know what to expect from Chicago. Would it be as hard as the wind whipping in off Lake Michigan?
The Chicago winters are not quite as bad as Moscow, but they can be pretty near as bad. Someone coming from Sicily, or I think this would have been certainly an adjustment. These folks were, for the most part, extremely grateful to have landed in what was esteemed at that time as one of the 3 or 4 great universities of the United States, and to be here on a reasonable salary. The University of Chicago in the mid-1930s was a fascinating place because it was one of the new universities founded at the end of the 19th century with an enormous amount of money from the Rockefeller family. It thought of itself as a very young and new university. Robert Hutchins was probably our most famous president. 6'1", 6'2", when he walked in the room, there was a sense of the smartest man had walked in the room.
I couldn't believe someone so young could be running a university.
Hutchins engineered the appointment of a number of émigrés from Europe, refugees from Hitler's Europe or Mussolini's Europe. I think Borgese was one of them. There were a number. And he saw this as a way of exercising his own authority as president, because he oftentimes put these things through without the active collaboration of the departments. He simply said, we're going to take this guy because he's a genius, or because he's very famous, or because he represents a kind of style of European erudition that would be complementary to what we do.
Hutchins was an internationalist. Not all Americans are, I can tell you. He had this idea that all students should study the great books of Western thought, from Aristotle to Einstein.
The Great Books program was a list of the classics of literature from the time of the Greeks to the present. Started with about 50 classics, and these are the ones that Borgese probably had a hand in choosing.
They constructed a curriculum that becomes the core curriculum, in which for the first 2 years you had students taking courses that were based not upon textbooks or on memorization of regurgitation of facts, but in which students would be given whole novels or whole reports to kind of train young 18 and 19-year-old kids out of American high schools how to think creatively using original documents.
I was in my element with all of this. As a teacher, I never liked being confined by the limits of nationality or culture. To teach, as to learn, is to reach out.
They would have taught between 8 and 10 hours a week. A man like Borgese probably could have walked in and taught just off the top of his head.
I don't know what my students thought of me. I think I got through to them. To be absolutely honest, I was more interested in some of the other people I was able to meet on the campus.
He had associates like Louis Mumford and Thomas Mann, who were much better known than Borgese.
Der Begriff des Klassischen.
Mann was a famous European novelist, and he lived in the United States during the war. He brought his family with him. Mann had this younger daughter. Borgese was, I don't know how old he was. He was not a young man, middle-aged, and he had been married once before. and he divorced his wife. And I don't know, they decided to get married.
I'm not sure Mann ever got used to his daughter being married to an older Italian divorcee.
Borgese had a birthday party in 1941. Thomas Mann came, and Borgese was holding forth about literature, and finally Mann said snottily that in every Italian there's a little bit of the buffone. This opened up the geyser of Borgese's rhetoric. Was Dante a buffone? Was Michelangelo a scallywag of an actor? And what finally was Mazzini? An empty stutterer?
These were halcyon days. We lived near the campus on Hyde Park Boulevard. I liked that I could walk home from work.
It was a walking community, a cycling community. Had a kind of village atmosphere, a much more personal community than any American university would be now.
But there was something else going on there.
It is December 2, 1942, the University of Chicago, birthplace of the atomic age. Here, behind the vine-covered walls of an almost abandoned football field, the government has already begun work on the most important device in modern history. Never before, and perhaps never again, will a single effort so profoundly affect the future of mankind. Here in this unimpressive building are gathered part of the elite core of world scientists who are building the bomb.
One of these scientists was a fellow countryman, Enrico Fermi.
Fermi built the apparatus, he called it an atomic pile, which would test the possibility of a controlled nuclear chain reaction. He installed the atomic pile in a squash court under the bleachers of the football stadium in Chicago, which Hutchins had closed on the argument that football was no part of education.
The stands were long ago destroyed and the football field relocated elsewhere. There's a monument now to this by Henry Moore.
Fermi and his wife Laura lived near us, but we weren't close. He had been a member of the fascist party in Italy. Now he was sent to work on the top-secret Manhattan Project.
Fermi, meanwhile, joined Robert Oppenheimer at Los Alamos, New Mexico, and was part of the team that actually produced the bomb. And it was made and used in anger on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Within 1 week, Robert M. Hutchins got on the radio and he declared that only a world state would be powerful enough to control this nuclear weapon.
He was dismayed that the bomb was used, as many were. I think he felt some personal responsibility that what had been used had been in part invented on this campus, and that now, with this having happened, someone in the academy or some group in the academy ought to put forward our views of what should happen in the future, as opposed to allowing the White House or the Kremlin to dictate the future of the world.
That's how the Committee to Frame a World Constitution came about.
They used to meet over in the Shoreland Hotel, which is a hotel still there on the lake. And they would have these debates. It was almost as if they reminded me of working groups at the Peace Treaty for Versailles, like putting Europe back together after World War I. Well, this was kind of very similar, and putting the world back together after 1945.
They aimed to create a union of peoples and states to keep the peace. They were not unrealistic. They were brave. They were courageous. They said the things that were plain. The world had to disarm and begin to function as a political union. Borgese thought that an effective world union of peoples would have to aim at both peace and justice. He was the one who drafted the version that was published. They started with the preamble that the age of nations must end. What Borgese was talking about in 1948 was the end of racism and the end of colonialism and the end of poverty. This was justice.
The America of Harry Truman wasn't ready to hear this. The dropping of the atomic bomb had ushered in a new Cold War.
The Soviet Union and its agents have destroyed the independence of a whole series of nations in Eastern and Central Europe.
The nationalism that we thought we'd defeated was back with a vengeance.
Borgese knew how great countries like Italy could get swept away by tyranny, and he tried to guide the Americans away from it. He failed.
Frankly, I did fail, and I knew my time in America was over. It was clear that I would never have survived the McCarthyite witch hunts. It would have been like being back in Mussolini's Italy. There was a cruel wind coming, far more biting than anything coming in off Lake Michigan.